Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, my name is Olivia Lind Haldorsson and I am the head of the Children at Risk Unit at the Council of the Baltic Sea States Secretariat based in Stockholm. And the Council of the Baltic Sea States, the CBSS, is a regional platform for collaboration and building trust, and it gathers 11 members from across the region and the European Union. And together, our members work to strengthen our regional identity, to ensure that our region is safe and secure, prosperous and sustainable. And children at risk is one of the flagship priorities of the CBSS, and our members gather in an expert group to engage in dialogue, exchange and practical projects. And we do that to promote children's rights, to promote stronger national child protection systems, better child-friendly justice, and to ensure non-violent childhoods. And I am really delighted at this opportunity to present a good practice model that has its origins in our region, the Barnahus model. And Barnahus was first established in one of our member countries, Iceland, and has since then rapidly spread across our region, but also beyond. And today, 10 of our member states have a Barnahus or a similar service. And together we promote the development of the model, not only in our region, but also more broadly in Europe. And we do that through our Promise initiative, which has 3 branches, the Barnahus network, the Competence Center, and a practical project called Promise, which gathers partners from across Europe to strengthen and develop the Barnahus model so that it excels in practice. And Promise supports national and local organizations, both governmental and non-governmental, to establish and develop Barnahus. And we work with academia, professionals and experts, including from Barnahus, of course. And our work is supported by the European Union, the Council of Europe and the United Nations. And we also seek opportunities to inspire globally. And that's why I am so happy to contribute to your conference here today. And in my presentation, I will describe what Barnahus is and why we think it is a model for excellence in practice for child victims and witnesses of violence. I will look at the Barnahus quality standards, and I will briefly touch upon some of the opportunities and challenges to establish Barnahus in different contexts. When a child is exposed to violence, there are many different services and actors, including social welfare and child protection, law enforcement, medical and mental health services that have a duty to protect and assist the child. And when these actors don't work together in a coordinated fashion, the child can be drawn into parallel inquiries and assessments and move between different agencies and disciplines. Multiple interviews are conducted at different times, locations, and in our experience by professionals with varying degree of competence in carrying out interviews with children. And these kind of experiences may cause re-traumatization or traumatization of the child, prevent disclosure, and in a worst case scenario, it may also discredit the child as a witness. And this is, of course, a serious problem because the child's disclosure is so fundamental to ensure the safety and protection of the child, to determine the need for physical and mental recovery, and to secure a criminal investigation and judicial process that protects the procedural rights of both the child and the accused. And it may also cause severe delays in the child's recovery, especially if times are dragged out and the procedures are dragged out, or if trials and investigations turn out to be traumatic experiences for the child as events are revisited and re-examined again. Today, there is an increasing recognition that multidisciplinary and interagency collaboration is crucial to prevent all this from happening and to fulfill the rights of child victims and witnesses to protection, participation, support, and assistance. And Barnahus is recognized and is spreading quickly as a good practice model for multidisciplinary and interagency collaboration and interventions. Barnahus is Icelandic and means a house for children. And it is an actual house, a physical place that co-hosts different disciplines. And it's set up and organized in a way to make children feel comfortable and safe. And the image on this slide is an illustration of how a Barnahus can be set up. And as you will see, we describe Barnahus as a house with 4 different rooms that co-hosts different disciplines, including child protection, medical interventions, therapeutic interventions, and criminal investigation, the forensic interview. And the 4 rooms are embedded in a multidisciplinary architecture guided by key principles such as best interests of the child-friendly and participatory environment, inclusion, and professionalism. So all the co-located professionals have their own child-friendly room and their equipment that they need to do their job to carry out a child-centered and specialized intervention. And beyond carrying out their role, they also meet in interagency settings to discuss cases, including, for example, individual needs, appropriate response, and follow-up. And they share information according to national law and protocols. And the role of the Barnahus staff is to coordinate the interventions and facilitate the multidisciplinary collaboration. And this setup prevents that children are drawn into parallel and uncoordinated inquiries and assessments, and it thereby helps prevent traumatization or re-traumatization. And it also ensures that each child receives an individually adapted response according to their own complex needs. And I would like to emphasize that Barnahus is set up and practices to protect the rights of both children and the suspected perpetrator. And it's also important to note that we promote that Barnahus is formally embedded in national or local systems, for example, the judicial system, law enforcement, health or child protection systems. And each Barnahus should be an integral part of and contribute to national child-friendly justice systems and national child protection systems. So Barnahus is unique with some very special features, but it's also a flexible model that can be adapted to different legal, socioeconomic, and cultural contexts. And with so many different countries striving to ensure excellence in practice by setting up Barnahus, we find it our role to support countries so that they adapt the services without moving too far away from the very cornerstones of Barnahus. And we all know that justice for and care for child victims and witnesses of violence does not come without challenges. And we do need to get it right. Too many children still tell us that they wish that they hadn't reported the case in the first place, simply because once the machinery was started, it was in many ways worse than the actual abuse. And these are children who have overcome substantial barriers to speaking about the violence that they have been exposed to in the first place. But children tell us that they want justice. They want to tell us about their experiences, and they want us to listen carefully. And we need to get that right and help professionals to respond to children's want to be heard. And therefore, we find it really important that we ensure that professionals who gather in Barnahus feel that it's a help to their work and that it makes sense to deliver their services in a multidisciplinary environment. And here you can see a few quotes from professionals working in a Barnahus in Sweden. So I'd like to take a few moments to introduce the Barnahus quality standards, partly because they provide a deeper understanding of the model, but also because it visualizes how we respond to children's right and want to be heard, and the need for professionals to operate in environments that enable them to fulfill children's rights. So the Barnahus quality standards were developed as a part of our Promise initiative in collaboration with professionals from across Europe. It was also inspired by practice in the US in the child advocacy centers. And the Barnahus quality standards draw on international law, authoritative guidance, and the voices of professionals, children, and their families. And all the standards draw on tested practice and what Barnahus and similar services across Europe have seen really works for both professionals, children, and their families. And with this background, we believe that the standards have been developed and will support services to implement practice that prevents traumatization or re-traumatization, prevents undue delay, adapts the process to each individual child, even the very young, through individual assessments, for example, including on special needs and disabilities. We believe that the standards promote practice that produces testimonies that are admissible in court and have a high evidential value, protecting the rights of both the child and the accused. One of our key goals is that children should not have to go to court, but that the testimony taken in Barnahus is enough as evidence in the trials. So we also believe that the standards promote practice that ensures inclusion of a broad target group, and that the Barnahus focuses on all forms of violence. We believe that it ensures a balanced multidisciplinary response, which has an equal focus on justice and recovery. We believe that it promotes a participatory environment for children. And finally, that it builds awareness and trusts so that both children, caregivers, and professionals feel comfortable with the system and take action to report suspicions of violence or violence. So this here is an overview of the standards, and we don't have time to go into them in detail, but you can download a copy, and I will provide a link at the end of my presentation. I'd like to speak a little bit about the standards and how they can be applied, and to do so I have chosen to show you a few photos. This is Barnahus in Iceland, Reykjavik, and Barnahus in Sweden and Linköping. And these Barnahus practice slightly differently, but they are both great examples of how the standards can be applied. So if we start to talk about the house and the multidisciplinary architecture, alongside the first room, child protection. These elements are covered by a broad range of our standards. Child protection is, of course, central to ensuring the right of the child to be protected from violence, and the whole setup and organization and practice in Barnahus has an impact on how the case is handled from initial report, referral to Barnahus, and to follow-up interventions. So both Barnahus Iceland and Barnahus Linköping, they strive to offer that balanced approach between justice and recovery, and offer services in the four-room. And in doing so, they place emphasis on the three cross-cutting activities that are identified in our first standard. So they take special measures to ensure that the best interest of the child is considered throughout the process. In Barnahus, Linköping, and in Iceland, they use specific procedures and checklists for planning, information gathering, analysis, and reviewing outcomes, so that they always place the best interest of the child at the center. Both Barnahus also organize their services so that the child's right to be heard and receive information becomes central to the planning and evaluation. And they do that through follow-up meetings, surveys, and ongoing consultations with children and their families. And we are currently working with child participation professionals to develop tools and frameworks for Barnahus to work towards generating a participatory environment for each child. Preventing undue delay is really important to us. You saw those quotes a few slides away, where children talked about how undue delay impacts on them. And well-functioning collaboration and communication is key to achieving this. This has been identified both in Iceland and Linköping. And both Barnahus collect data and keep statistics about the timing of each activity. So this helps the team to stay informed about the timing of their activities, but also if they need to take further steps to prevent undue delay. If we look more at the structure of the house, many Barnahus across Europe have told us that it is really crucial to establish formal agreements, structures, and procedures to ensure commitment of all the agencies that need to gather in Barnahus. And this is so important to ensure commitment, trust, and sustainable operations. For example, in Barnahus Linköping, they have a formal interagency agreement in place, which commit the respective agencies to things like the organizational setup, resources, training, procedures, etc. And if we look at the case management per se, which is, of course, is an important element of the collaboration, our standard 5 stipulates that it's really important to have those mechanisms and procedures in place for joint case planning, review, and tracking. And it's also really important to have a contact person with the family that can ensure the link between the multidisciplinary team and the child and the family. A key aspect of our work is to promote that Barnahus welcomes a broad and inclusive target group, including all children who are victims or witnesses of all forms of violence. And this often happens over time. For example, Barnahus started out looking only at cases of sexual violence, but now covers all forms of violence. And a secondary target group for both Barnahus includes the child's caregivers and potential siblings. And access for all children is crucial, but it is sometimes a challenge. And we often see that once a Barnahus is established, the demand increases. And this mostly leads to more Barnahus being established, that satellite units are set up, and sometimes even mobile units. And we hear often about the adventures from our Icelandic colleagues and how they make their way to remote areas in Iceland. And one of the key purposes of Barnahus is, of course, to ensure that children are in an environment that makes them feel comfortable and safe. And our standards therefore include a focus on a child-friendly environment. And you see here on the image two detached buildings placed in a safe and secure environment. And both of these Barnahus are easy accessible for the target groups. Indoor decoration, furniture is child-friendly and adapted both to younger children and adolescents, as well as children with special needs and or disabilities. And privacy is central to the way that the Barnahus is set up, and of course, all contact with the suspected perpetrator should be avoided. And children tell us that respect and kindness from staff is the most important aspect of their experiences in Barnahus. So it's not just about the physical environment, it is how you are welcomed and treated in Barnahus that makes a difference. A key role of Barnahus is to ensure competent and effective interventions, and our standard 9 is dedicated to different elements to ensure that there is ongoing capacity building, peer support and supervision of all staff. And finally, we see from our work that Barnahus play a really important role in prevention and information sharing. And standard 10 is dedicated to specific activities such as data collection, exchange, and external competence building activities such as information meetings and training. And for example, in Linköping, they have regular meetings with professionals from schools and other environments where professionals meet children about violence, how to detect violence, how to report violence, and what happens when you report a suspicion of violence against children. And beyond these cross-cutting standards, which have so much impact on the way that children feel safe and comfortable, and how they are met by a professional response, taking into account their views and their best interests, we also have standards that relate specifically to the respective rooms in Barnahus. So we looked a bit at child protection now. So I'd like to move on to the forensic interview, which is guided by our standard number 6. And it has several different elements that are implemented in both Iceland and Linköping. And you here see interview rooms and observation rooms from both houses. So trained and qualified staff carry out the interviews using evidence-based protocols, and the interview is carried out in a child-friendly environment, and this is to create an enabling space for the child to deliver the best possible evidence. In Sweden, it's a police officer that interviews the child in Barnahus, and in Iceland, it's a specialist such as a psychologist. However, regardless of their profession, they both receive special training in forensic interviews with children and they both use evidence-based protocols such as the NICHD protocol. A key aspect is, of course, to ensure that the interview is carried out in a way that produces valid and admissible testimony in court, and that the whole procedure respects the right of the defendant. And the other representatives in the Barnahus view the interview from a nearby room. And this is to minimize the numbers of interviews, but also to facilitate the multidisciplinary case management. And the report is recorded so that it can be used in court. And the participants in the observation room vary slightly between the different Barnahus, but we recommend that there is a member from each discipline present to enable that effective planning and case management. So if we move on to our next room, which is the medical room, our standard 7 focuses on a professional and child-friendly medical intervention, including a top-to-toe examination and a forensic examination if it is ordered by a relevant authority. And child participation is, of course, central to this standard so that the examinations are carried out in a respectful manner that takes the views of the child into account, both in terms of follow-up information and potential interventions. In Linköping, the medical examination is carried out by a pediatrician on call, often together with a forensic doctor, and the medical examinations are mostly done on the same day of the forensic interview, and it takes into account the best interest of the child and ensures that the findings can provide proper input to child protection and risk assessment. And the pediatrician's expertise is considered important throughout the case, and they are present in the joint consultation meetings where cases are planned and reviewed. If we look at the next room and standard 8, it also focuses on ensuring professional and child-friendly examinations and interventions. And this also includes crisis support. Again, child participation is key to the implementation of the standard and in planning potential therapeutic interventions. And in Iceland, after the child has gone through an exploratory or a court hearing interview, the Barnahus team decides whether the child requires further support or assistance. And therapeutic services are always offered when a child discloses abuse. The child is then referred to a therapist in the Barnahus who carries out an assessment and then provides appropriate therapy and follow-up. And the therapists are all mental health professionals and are trained in trauma-focused therapy and are considered important resources in the interagency case planning and therefore participate in all meetings. So that's a quick whistle-stop tour of the standards. You might ask yourself then, do all the Barnahus in Europe perform against the standards? And the answer is no. And we encourage progressive development and growth of Barnahus as long as there is a firm eye on where you are heading. And it's therefore really important to monitor and evaluate the organizational setup and performance of the service regularly, so that you know that you are heading in a direction and taking steps that will help you excel in practice. And beyond monitoring performance, evaluation is, of course, always important because it provides opportunities to ensure that new research, guidance, law, and experience from practice and others set up inform what you do. And we believe that special efforts always should be made to ensure that children are heard and that their views inform potential reform of practice, setup, or organization. And in order to be successful with the standards, you will of course also be it will also be important that you pay attention to enabling and inhibiting external elements, and that can be legal or procedural requirements. For example, data protection has had an important impact on the way that professionals can exchange information in our Barnahus, and is often a challenge. And we, of course, recognize that the road to Barnahus isn't always smooth, and things like lack of political commitment, limitations in law or procedures, conflicting interests, lack of human resources or trained staff, a lack of an understanding of children's capabilities, persistent habits, budget constraints. There are so many things that can come in the way for Barnahus to be established and operate according to the standards. But nothing is impossible. And even though these are challenges that many countries struggle with, we do see progress and incredible commitment to adapt to the different national contexts. And this is why we believe that our cross-country dialogue, our exchange, and our joint development of practical projects and tools is so important, and that it is a genuine motor for change. And we support and inspire each other constantly to move forward and finding ways to overcome obstacles, always recognizing that Barnahus is an evolving practice, and always keeping an eye on emerging and developing trends, new research, guidance, and promising practice that can be brought to the model. And we believe that the most important thing is to start somewhere, and that you use the standards to progressively achieve excellence in practice. And this is indeed how practice has been inspired and evolved in an increasing number of countries in Europe and globally. And this is also why we seek these kind of opportunities, because we want to learn together with practitioners from all around the world. And we firmly believe that it is worth the effort. To end, I'd like to share two quotes from children that have visited Barnahus and the Youth and Child Protection Center in Zagreb in Croatia. So let's begin with this child. This center is wonderful. The people here are great. Don't be afraid. They just want to help us. It doesn't matter if we were emotionally or sexually abused. They are really wonderful. Thank you for helping us. This is a quote shared from our colleagues who work at the Child and Youth Protection Center in Zagreb in Croatia. And finally, from Barnahus, Iceland. I couldn't sleep all night because I was so worried. But when I came into Barnahus and saw that it was a house for children, I felt relaxed and my anxiety was gone. Thank you very much.